Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about arithmetic, sequences, and series. We're going to find nth terms and partial sums of these arithmetic sequences. Get ready to unlock the power of math together. Let's dive right in. So an arithmetic sequence has a constant difference between these terms. So what that really means is we are going to either add or subtract that same number each time. When you look at explicit formula and recursive, remember that explicit is to find any term and recursive is to find a total. Now, remember that an arithmetic sequence is linear. Okay, it is linear. And D is the slope. Okay, so it is linear and D is the slope, or again, that constant change. Now, when you look at your explicit formula, what you are going to look at is, again, a sub 1 is your first number. That D, or that difference, right, is that change, what you add or what you subtract every time. And then the N, again, is that term that you want. Now, in your recursive formula, we know that a sub 1 is our first term, whatever that might be. You know that a sub n is your last term. A sub n minus 1 was that previous term, and again, D was that difference, and n is the number of terms that you might have. So here we're going to write both an explicit and recursive rule for this arithmetic sequence. So let's see what's going on with our sequence. So from 4 to 1 to -2 to -5, I am subtracting 3. So for our explicit, what we're going to do is, again, use our formula. We're looking at a sub n, and then a sub 1 is our first term, so that's 4. And then we are going to add it to n minus 1. And then that difference that we found was -3. Okay, again, because you have a general rule, we don't know what our nth term is. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and simplify. So you can distribute. So this becomes -3n plus 3. And we are going to still bring down this 4. And now our general formula here is a sub n, and then combine like terms, let's get -3 and then plus 7. Now for the recursive formula, what we're going to do is use, again, what we know from the beginning with our terms. We will identify what is a sub 1. So we know a sub 1, that is 4. And then we have a sub n. And our general form is a sub n minus 1. Again, that's our previous term. And then we are adding to D, or our difference, which was -3. Or you could put a sub n and then just put a -3. Okay, here in this question, we are finding the 271st term of this sequence. So again, let's identify what's going on. We will be subtracting 6 every time, so that's the difference, because you want to find a term, right? This is the explicit formula. So you are trying to find a sub, the nth, or the n term is the 271. We are going to look at a sub 1, that's my first term here, that's 24, and then plus n minus 1, so 271 minus 1 times your difference, which was -6. When we do our order of operations, you're going to get -1596. Okay, here we are going to find the first 5 terms of the arithmetic sequence. So when you look at what you have a sub 8, which is 26, and then you have a sub 12, which is 42. Now here, what you're going to need to look at is some keywords. Your arithmetic means that this is linear. right? And what we know also is that when we want to find the d, or that difference, it is the slope, right? So right now we have some sort of points, right? You can think about them as the number or the end term and what it actually equals. So you can find the slope, and that's going to be the change, right? The change in y over your change in x. So the change in your number and then the change in your x, which was the number of the term. So you have 42 minus 26 over 12 minus 8. As we simplify, we get 16 over 4, which gets me 4. So my difference is 4, so that's my d. And then what we want to do is we sort of have to work backwards, right? We need to be able to figure out what is actually our first term. Now, you could work backwards if you want. You could also use your explicit formula to be able to find a sub n. So we would use our explicit formula right here, which look like this. So a sub n, right, you could pick, you've got, let's say, 26, and then we know that the n value was 8. Now, my a sub 1 is what I'm trying to find, right? I don't know what a sub 1 is. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, you do know d, right? D we just figured out, which was 4. So as we simplify, you get 26. And then we get 28. So when we subtract, we have a sub 1, which was negative 2. So now what we have is certain informations, right? You can figure out then that your first term, your a sub 1, is negative 2. And then that difference, we were adding 4 every time. Now, to get the next 4 terms in that sequence, because you're going to get 5, right, you could just add 4 every time. So that would get you, right, plus 4. That would get us 2, 6, 10, and 14. So here are the first 5 terms of that sequence. All right, so here what we will look at is our sum. Now, the sum of a series is your formula here, right? Remember, our sequences was just your list. Your series is adding those terms in that list together. Now, here you have a question that's asking you to find the partial sum, right? We're trying to find the sum of this sequence, which would be a series. Now, let's figure out what our difference is here. We look at 8 to 26, and then you know you are adding 18 every time. So in order for us to figure out what our sum is, right, we want the first 100, so that's s sub 100. You know what n is, right? N is 100 divided by 2. You have to figure out what a sub 1 is. That's coming from your list here, which is 8. And then you are adding. Now you don't know a sub n or a sub 100. So in order for us to figure that out, we will have to calculate a sub 100. So again, in order to find a term, that was a sub n and then a sub 1, and then you got n minus 1 and the d. So we're trying to figure out a sub 100. You know your first term, that was the 8, and then you are adding. You are trying to find the n term, which is the 100th term, minus 1. And then you have your difference there, which was 18. So as we figure this out, you get 1790 as your a sub 100, and that goes in place right here. So then s sub 100, as you figure out your math, is 89,900. All right, here we go. So here we have our sum that we are trying to find. You are given a starting number, so k equals 1, going to 84, and then you have a formula here. So let's figure out what n is. N, we are trying to get from 1 to 84, so the number of terms is 84. So now we're trying to find the sum of 84 terms, right? We know 84 over 2 using our formula, right? You need to figure out what the first term is, so a sub 1, as well as your last term, which is a sub 84. All right, so in order to figure those out, we're going to just take those values and plug them into our formula. So a sub 1 is 3 times, you have 1 and then minus 7, which gets me negative 4. So negative 4 goes right here. And then a sub 84, trying to figure out 3 times our 84th term, minus 7, which is 245. So you're plugging in your numbers in the appropriate spot. And your answer as you simplify this is 10,122. Okay, here in number 6, we are looking again at a sum. However, notice that we're not starting at 1. So when you want to figure out your n, or your number of terms, we have to take our upper term and then subtract it from the lower. And then you actually have to add 1 because you're going to be counting from 20, 21, 22, 23. So you have to add 1 more. So that would get me 34 minus 20 plus 1. So my n is 15. So that's 15 terms counting from 20 to 34. You want to find a sum. So you're trying to figure out the sum of your 15 terms. Your n value is 15 over 2. You are trying to figure out what is not a sub 1. Your first term is technically a sub 20, right? And then the last bit is trying to figure out a sub 34. Okay, so again, now we have to figure out a sub 20. So plug in 20 into your formula. So that's negative 2 times 20 plus 3, which gets you negative 37. And then we're going to figure out a sub 34. So we got negative 2 times 34 plus 3, which gets us negative 65. So you are plugging in your numbers in the appropriate spot. And as you figure out what your calculations are, you're going to get S sub 15, or the sum of those 15 terms, which is negative 765. Thanks for learning with me today, unlocking the power of math, one problem at a time. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future notifications on pre-calc videos. See you in the next lesson.